Football contracts. To become a footballer, you need a contract, which ideally includes what a player will get from a club, what the club expects from the player, and how long the relationship will last. Easy to understand. However, for the purposes of this video, let's say you recently got yourself a contract to work at McDonald's. All the standard proceeds are involved, your hourly rate, how many hours you work there, but also, you find in a small print that every 2 years you work there, you're given a goat as a gift. At first glance, you think, wow, in all my years of wanting a goat, my dreams are finally being fulfilled. But then, when it lingers, you start to think, that's a weird addition to my contract. And that's what we're going to find out today as we explore the 7 strangest football contract clauses. Number 7, Dennis Bergkamp, the man with 2 nicknames. One being the Iceman, playing with a calm and cool demeanor while performing some of the most outrageous tricks. The other being the non-flying Dutchman. Before playing for the Netherlands against Wales in 1996, Bergkamp exclaimed how he would rather miss some of the biggest competitions in football if it meant he had to fly to them. A year earlier, when he signed for Arsenal, he made it absolutely clear that he wanted a clause in his contract with the North London club, stating that he would not be required to travel to away games if doing so involved boarding a plane. He was happy to travel by road or rail, but going to Heathrow Airport was a no-go. In his autobiography, the club deducted a sum of his wage demand. However, in his own words, he also said the clause was never a problem for the club. Bergkamp himself later admitted the aversion freed him, because previously, worrying about upcoming flights affected his mindset even during games, which in hindsight surely did help him to become one of the most recognizable and respected legends in the Premier League. Number 6, Roberto Firmino, a player who is slowly growing on more football fans for his input as a lethal finisher and a great builder of attacking play. Kind of like Harry Kane. Even after 4 years, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say that Liverpool miss a frontman like Firmino today. A striker who any football club around the world would greatly appreciate, and Liverpool were sure to understand if that was to become a reality. However, there was one club which Liverpool ensured wouldn't try their luck with snatching Firmino from their books. Signed in 2015, just in time for the up-and-coming Klopp era, Firmino joined from Hoffenheim, and the rest was history. What, coincidentally enough, may have been left in history was one of the clauses in his Liverpool contract. 2 years before his deal had been made, when Luis Suarez was banging them in, Arsenal made a bid of £40 million plus £1 for him to trigger a clause in his contract that would force Liverpool to inform him of the offer. Normally, it would be a release clause that would mandate Liverpool to sell him. But it was instead a requirement of Liverpool to inform Suarez of any bid over £40 million. Presumably, it was these actions that led to the anti-Arsenal release clause, which involves Firmino's contract with Liverpool to include a release clause, reportedly about £82 million. And with an added caveat, the clause could be triggered by any club except Arsenal. Even 2 years after, the hubris of Arsenal stayed in Liverpool's mind rent-free. Number 5, Stig Ingebjornby. Travelling back to the early 90s under Graham Souness, Liverpool swooped in for an already established Norwegian international, who won silverware in Norway with Rosenborg. It could be well argued that footballers today aren't perceived as human beings, but rather than numbers, and more so relating to this edition, investments. For £600,000, Liverpool acquired his services and would go on to make 139 competitive appearances for Liverpool from 1992 to 2000. As we've already discussed clauses involving air travel and massive release clauses, we're now entering the clauses away from football. For Stig Ingebjornby had a weird contract clause forbidding him from going skiing. The reasoning commonly given is that Liverpool wanted to protect their investment. Skiing or other snow-based hazardous activities could pose a risk to injury, so he couldn't come within 200 yards of a ski slope. Considering his dad was an Olympic ski jumper and Stig apparently had skiing interests, I guess he'll only be able to enjoy his hobbies again once he had retired in 2003, unless Blackburn allowed him to go skiing during the school holidays. Number 4, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. Before we dive into this clause, I must use this word before anything else. Allegedly, when Oxlade-Chamberlain joined Arsenal in 2011 from Southampton for £12 million, there was an additional £3 million with add-ons. What were these add-ons? There could be a goal clause, an assist clause, an injury clause. How about a 20-minute appearance fee clause? For 6 years, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain represented Arsenal, and though his contract could have been reviewed and changed during this time, initially, Arsenal would have to pay Southampton an extra fee of money every time Oxlade-Chamberlain played at least 20 minutes in a game. Online, sources show Arsenal paid £10,000 every time this clause was activated. 198 competitive games later, you would have to start wondering how much Southampton raised with this clause alone. That is seriously the kind of stuff we all have to suffer with, where everything is paid in installments. Trust me, hip replacements and metal kneecaps will include a pay-as-you-walk subscription in the future. You heard it here first, people. Number 3, Ronaldinho. In Ronaldinho's later years, even though he was about 31 years old at this time, he joined Flamengo from AC Milan in 2011. For 10 years, he had travelled around Europe, being a part of some of Europe's biggest sides in PSG and Barcelona, and the maker of some of the best 10-second reels and TikToks showing his flair and skills, which obviously do in fact pay the bills. By the time Ronaldinho joined Flamengo, he had hit his peak a few years before, and it was more homecoming after a long European career. The move created an opportunity to regain form and fitness in a familiar environment, as it was a shift from elite European competitions domestic Brazilian football, signalling the start of the final stages of his professional career. Putting pen to paper to begin his year-long stay at Flamengo, though his actual Flamengo contract was never published, multiple international and Brazilian sports outlets reported on a clause in his contract which you may not envision would be included for a footballer hitting their peak in the top 5 leagues in Europe. The reports are consistent, which is why it's become part of football law that Ronaldinho had a 2 nights out clause, allowing him to go out twice a week. In short, it probably existed, but there's no official, publicly available contract proving it. It proved to be worth it though, where he scored 23 goals in 56 competitive games. Number 2, Giuseppe Reina. Now you've heard this one, and though it's debatable of it being the strangest clause, the outcome is surely the funniest, which is why it's near top spot. A German striker who spent his entire career in Germany. He moved to Arminia Bielefeld in 1996. With a contract which lasted 3 years, it would seem to have been the case of trying his luck, as he added a clause in his contract. The clause, handwritten mind you, stated that the club must build him a house for every year of the contract. Now, even today, this story is being refuted, considered a comedic exaggeration that became internet folklore, but it still has its place in this list for the obscurity of the situation. With the clause made, specifics were necessary, as there was no specific size, land value, features or definition of what house meant legally. So for each year, he was given a Lego house, is what I wish I could say. It is this that seems to be a total myth. Reina did not receive 3 Lego houses each year, but instead, Arminia Bielefeld built him minimalist structures, not full homes. This led to Reina taking legal action against the club over the interpretation of the clause. A legal dispute arose and was settled privately. Honestly, I wish Giuseppe Reina received 3 Lego houses in 3 years, but here is what I want to ask you. Where is the source? And no, I'm not talking about Wikipedia or The Sun. So yes, the house per season clause was real, but the Lego part seems more like an anecdote rather than a verified event. So now let's roll out some honourable mentions and maybe bring some clarity to some clauses in the world of football. Nero Ruddock had a formal weight clause in his contract, requiring him to stay below a certain body mass threshold. If he exceeded the limit, his salary would be cut. Crystal Palace introduced the clause because he repeatedly failed fitness tests and famously arrived heavier than expected after holidays. This is one of the earliest well-known weight monitoring clauses in English football and a precursor to modern body fat clauses used today. When Rafael van der Vaart signed for Real Betis in June 2015, the move was widely described in the Spanish press as a dream for the Dutch midfielder because he had family ties to the region near Seville. At this point in his career, he made very little appearances due to injuries and tactical decisions. In some later media reports, outlets reference an unusual detail that Betis allegedly negotiated a financial clause related to the colour of his boots, reportedly paying amounts for not wearing red boots due to the club's rivalry with Sevilla. As a result, it's reported he was on relatively low wages, but earned much more for his choice in footwear. Now, on to the most bizarre and strangest contract clause. Number 1. Stefan Schwarz. The Swedish midfielder moved to Sunderland from Valencia in July 1999. At this time, Schwarz was already a well-established Swedish international and had played for some big teams to go with it, with the likes of Arsenal, Fiorentina and Benfica acquiring his services. His move to Sunderland, however, is the move which earns him top spot on this list. Around that time, private commercial space tourism was beginning to be talked about, with companies planning future flights and tickets being sold for potential passengers. Schwarz publicly expressed interest in joining one of these early commercial space missions. If his dreams were to be realized, he would have to wait until 2003, when he would retire from football, as there was a no space travel clause in his contract for the Black Cats. It was apparent that Sunderland's management was concerned that if Schwarz actually booked and took a space flight during the term of his contract, it would conflict with his availability to play, pose insurance and risk issues, and potentially see them lose a contracted player for an extended period.
Really?
What is, for me, the funniest inclusion to this contract is the fact that to preempt the unlikely but theoretically possible situation, Sunderland inserted a contractual provision stating that if Schwarz actually travelled to outer space, his contract would be invalidated. It is unfortunate to say then, even in 2025, that Schwarz never actually travelled to space. It goes to show that even if you were a professional footballer, adored by millions and earning much more, your dreams could still not in fact come true. And that is the 7 strangest and most bizarre contract clauses in football. Be sure to comment which one you like best and any other you'd add to this list. Like, comment, subscribe, and as always, I will see you soon.